The women who make men fall hard and stay obsessed aren't the ones who give everything they have. They're not the ones texting first every time, always dropping everything to be available, always bending over backwards to prove how much they care. There's one boundary that flips a man's entire psychology upside down and makes him see a woman as someone he simply can't replace. This single shift is what moves you from being someone he likes to being someone he can't picture his life without. You've probably been fed the wrong story about love. You've been told it's about sacrifice, about giving until it hurts, about proving your worth through endless devotion. But what if that advice has actually been the thing keeping you single, keeping your heart broken, keeping the men you actually want just out of reach? What if the real secret to making a man fall deeply, irreversibly in love has nothing to do with what you hand over to him and everything to do with what you hold back? This isn't about manipulation or playing games. It's about understanding one psychological trigger that quietly rewires how a man's brain responds to you. Here's something that might catch you off guard. The way most people think men fall in love is backwards. Most women assume love deepens through closeness, through sharing everything, staying completely open, being endlessly available. The logic seems to be that the more a man knows about you, the more time you spend together, the deeper his feelings will grow. But here's the harder truth nobody wants to say out loud. Men don't fall in love through comfort. They fall in love through tension. A man's brain simply isn't wired the way yours is. While you might feel closer to someone the more available they are, his psychology runs in the opposite direction. The male mind is built to pursue, to chase, to work for the things it values. And here's the part that stings a little. When something comes too easily, when there's no friction and nothing left to discover, his interest doesn't grow. It dies out. Think about any man you've known who's been completely captivated by a woman. Chances are, she wasn't the one who dropped everything for him. She wasn't the one who answered every call the instant he reached out. She wasn't the one clearing every obstacle out of his path to make his life easier. No, the woman he couldn't stop thinking about was the one who made him work for it, the one with actual standards, the one whose life was so full and interesting that he had to earn a place in it. Psychologists refer to this as the scarcity principle. Our brains assign value based on how rare and how hard-won something is. This isn't unique to relationships. It applies to almost everything in life. The harder something is to obtain, the more valuable our minds perceive it to be. When a man has to invest time, effort, and emotional energy to win your attention, something shifts in his brain. He starts telling himself, "You must be worth all that effort. Otherwise, why would he be trying so hard?" Here's where it gets even more interesting though. It's not just about the chase itself, it's about what happens inside his mind during that chase. Every time he has to work to earn your attention, every time he rises to meet your standards, every time he chooses to keep pursuing you despite the challenge, he's making a psychological investment in you. And the more he invests, the more valuable you become to him. Not necessarily because of who you inherently are, but because of what he's put into winning you. This is exactly why the neediest women often struggle to keep a man's interest long term. It's not that they're unworthy of love, it's that they've unknowingly eliminated the very psychological process that creates obsession in the first place. They've made themselves too easy to get, too available to appreciate, too predictable to actually pursue. The woman who understands this, who creates healthy tension, who maintains her own life and her own standards, triggers something primal in a man. She becomes the prize he has to win, not the fallback he settles for. That single shift in dynamic is what transforms simple liking into real love and attraction into genuine obsession. But here's where most women get it wrong. They assume this means being cold, distant, or deliberately playing hard to get. It doesn't mean that at all. It means being valuable. It means holding on to your standards. It means refusing to abandon yourself just to keep someone else close. Here's something painful but necessary to hear. Most relationships don't fall apart because two people stop caring about each other. They fall apart because one person starts caring too much at the cost of themselves. And 9 times out of 10, that person is the woman. She begins reshaping her entire life around his schedule, his moods, his needs, believing this level of devotion will finally make him love her more. But here's the cruel twist. The more she gives up of herself, the less interested he becomes. Not because he's cold-hearted, but because without meaning to, she's teaching him that she has no boundaries, no real standards, and, most importantly, no other options. When a man senses he's someone's entire source of happiness, their whole world, their only priority, it doesn't make him feel treasured, it makes him feel suffocated. Look at it through his eyes for a second. In the beginning, what drew him in was your independence, your passion, the fullness of your life. You had friends, hobbies, dreams that lit you up. You were vibrant and confident, and you chose to spend your time with him. That was the appeal. But slowly, without either of you noticing at first, you started cancelling plans to stay available for him. You stopped talking about your own goals because his mattered more to you in the moment. You made him the center of your entire universe. And paradoxically, the second you did that, you became less interesting to him because the woman he originally fell for, the one with her own life, her own dreams, her own boundaries, slowly started to fade. In her place was someone who seemed to need him just to feel whole. And somewhere deep down, every man senses that kind of need isn't love, it's dependency. This is why so many women go through that devastating cycle where everything starts out perfect and then he begins to pull away. They assume they did something wrong, when really they did the thing they thought was right. They loved without limits, gave without boundaries, put his happiness ahead of their own. The uncomfortable truth is that unlimited love, however beautiful it sounds in theory, often quietly kills attraction in practice. Without boundaries, there's no tension. Without tension, there's no excitement. And without excitement, love slowly settles into something comfortable but lifeless. There's another layer to this that does even more damage. When you let go of your boundaries, you start losing respect for yourself. And if you don't respect yourself, how can you realistically expect someone else to? That erosion of self-respect shows up in 100 small ways. In how you talk to yourself, in what behavior you're willing to tolerate, even when it clashes with your values, in the way you shrink to make space for someone else's ego. Men can pick up on this, even if it's never said out loud. And unfortunately, sensing that a woman doesn't value herself doesn't inspire a man to value her more. It does the opposite, because deep down, everyone, men and women alike, wants to be with someone who knows their own worth. The relationships that actually last, the ones where the spark stays alive year after year, are built on mutual respect, and respect only exists where boundaries do. Clear lines that say, I love you, but I refuse to lose myself in loving you. That's the foundation everything else here is built on. Once you understand this principle, it changes not just how he sees you, but how you see yourself. And that internal shift in your own energy and confidence is where the real magic happens. Here's what most people misunderstand about boundaries. They assume boundaries are walls built to keep people out. They're not. Boundaries are standards that teach people how to treat you and love you well. They're not about punishment or rejection. They're about building a framework for love that's healthy and sustainable. When you hold strong boundaries, you send a clear message without saying a single word. You communicate that you value yourself, that your time and energy matter, and that access to your heart has to be earned, not simply assumed. And here's the beautiful paradox in all of this. It doesn't push good men away. It pulls them in like a magnet. Why? Because buried in every man's psychology is a need to feel like he's won something genuinely valuable. He doesn't want to be with someone who'll settle for anyone. He wants to be chosen by someone specifically because he proved himself worthy of that choice. When you carry standards, when you hold real boundaries, when you refuse to accept less than what you deserve, you're giving him the chance to rise and actually meet you at that level. Think about anything valuable in your life. Was any of it just handed to you? The job you're proud of, you worked for it. The achievements that matter to you, you earned them. The respect people show you, you built that over time. Why would love work any differently? When something demands effort, investment, and consistency to obtain, it naturally becomes more valuable in our minds. That's exactly why the women who keep men genuinely obsessed are the ones who protect their mystery, their standards, their independence. They love fully, but never at their own expense. They give generously, but never more than they receive. They stay available for the right man, but not for just anyone who shows up. Boundaries also create something men rarely admit they need: emotional safety. So many women assume that being completely open, completely available, completely accommodating will make a man feel secure. It actually does the opposite. Without limits, without structure, without clear expectations, uncertainty creeps in. He doesn't know where he stands. He doesn't know what's expected of him. He doesn't know how to succeed with you. But when you hold clear boundaries, you create clarity instead. You make it easier for him to love you well, because you've actually shown him how. You've set the terms of engagement, and now he can focus on rising to meet them instead of guessing at what game he's even playing. And here's the most important part of all. Boundaries were never just about him. They're about you. When you maintain your standards, you maintain your self-respect. When you maintain your self-respect, your confidence stays intact. When your confidence stays intact, so does your magnetism. It's a self-reinforcing cycle that keeps love alive and growing rather than letting it stagnate. Now here's the boundary itself. Simple to say, but genuinely powerful once you live by it. Never make someone a priority who only makes you an option. It sounds almost too obvious, doesn't it? But once you really understand what it means, once you actually start living by it, everything shifts. Because most women, in their eagerness to love fully and show how they feel, unconsciously flip this dynamic on its head. They make him their top priority while quietly accepting being his backup plan. They rearrange their entire lives around his schedule while he fits them in whenever it's convenient. They pour emotional energy into someone who isn't matching that investment. Living by this boundary means you match his energy instead. If he texts once a day, you don't text him 5 times in return. If he only makes plans with you when nothing else is going on, you don't cancel your own plans to accommodate his last-minute availability. If he treats you as one option among several, you stop treating him as your only choice. What this boundary actually does is force him to either step up or step back, and both outcomes end up being wins for you. The moment you stop overgiving, the moment you stop investing more than he is, one of two things happens. Either he rises to meet your energy and starts genuinely prioritizing you the way you've been prioritizing him, or he fades out entirely because he was never truly invested to begin with. The men who step up, who put in more effort once they realize they can't take you for granted anymore, those are the ones actually worth your time. They're the ones who recognize your value and are willing to work to keep you in their life. The men who disappear the moment you stop overgiving are actually doing you a favor. They're revealing that they were only ever interested in what you could offer them, not in who you actually are. This boundary also does something powerful to your own mindset. Once you stop pouring your energy into someone who isn't prioritizing you back, that energy naturally flows back into your own life, your goals, your happiness, your growth. And here's what happens when you become the center of your own world instead of making him the center of it. You become more interesting, more fulfilled, more magnetic. Men can sense when a woman has options, when her life is full, when she isn't sitting around waiting for someone else to validate her existence. That confidence, that quiet certainty that comes from knowing your own worth is genuinely magnetic. It makes him want to work harder to hold on to your attention, because he can tell other people want it too. This boundary keeps you from becoming the woman who's endlessly available, endlessly accommodating, always putting his needs above her own. Instead, you become someone who's selective with her time, intentional with her energy, and clear about her standards. Someone whose attention feels valuable precisely because it isn't handed out freely. And here's the beautiful outcome of all this. When you stop making someone a priority who only makes you an option, you start attracting people who actually want to make you their priority. You stop settling for breadcrumbs and start being offered the full meal. You stop accepting part-time attention and start commanding full devotion. This has nothing to do with being difficult or high maintenance. It's about knowing your worth and refusing to accept anything less than what you deserve. It's about understanding that real love is reciprocal, that healthy relationships need mutual investment from both sides, and that the right person will rise to meet you rather than expecting you to shrink down to their level. When you actually live by this boundary, something shifts in how he sees you. He begins to view you as someone genuinely special, someone who doesn't just let anyone into her life, and that realization makes him want to earn his place in it. It makes him want to be worthy of your priority because he understands that being made a priority by you actually means something. Now let's talk about what actually happens once you put this into practice, because understanding a concept means nothing without seeing it play out. As you start matching his energy instead of exceeding it, as you stop making him your priority while quietly accepting option status yourself, his behavior will shift. And the way it shifts tells you everything you need to know about his true intentions. If he was genuinely interested but had simply started taking you for granted, you'll notice him stepping up. He'll initiate more conversations. He'll make clearer plans. He'll start prioritizing time with you because he realizes you won't always be sitting around waiting whenever he decides he wants attention. This is the response worth paying attention to because it shows he actually values you and is willing to put in effort to keep you around. But you might also encounter resistance. Some men, particularly the ones who are only interested in the convenience you provided, may get frustrated when you stop overgiving. They might accuse you of playing games or being difficult. That reaction tells you everything you need to know. A man who gets upset the moment you start valuing yourself was never actually invested in your well-being. He was invested in your willingness to accept less than you deserved. You'll also notice a shift in your own energy. Once you stop pouring all your emotional resources into someone who isn't reciprocating, you have more left over for yourself. Friends will start noticing how much lighter and happier you seem. Your confidence will rise. You'll find yourself picking back up hobbies and goals you'd let slide. And this personal renewal makes you even more attractive in the process. Something else happens too. Other people start noticing you more. When your focus isn't entirely consumed by one person who doesn't fully appreciate it, you naturally become more visible, more present, more open to connection elsewhere. You might find men who once saw you as unavailable suddenly showing genuine interest. You might discover opportunities and relationships you'd been missing simply because all your attention had been funneled in one direction. The most beautiful outcome of all is that you start attracting people who genuinely want to prioritize you. Once you stop accepting option status, you become magnetic to people actually looking for someone to treasure. It's like you start broadcasting on a completely different frequency, and suddenly you're drawing in people who are tuned to match it. One important note though, this boundary only works with consistency. You can't apply it for a week and abandon it the moment he throws you a little attention. The men who genuinely respect this boundary, who rise to meet your standards, need to see that those standards are real and lasting, not a temporary test they can simply wait out. Some women mistakenly think this boundary is about punishment or withholding love. It isn't. It's about mutual investment. It's about creating a relationship where both people are equally invested in each other's happiness and well-being. It's about refusing to be the only one doing the emotional heavy lifting. When both people in a relationship operate by this same principle, when both are equally prioritizing each other, something remarkable happens. There's no resentment because the investment stays balanced. There's no taking each other for granted because both people had to earn their place in the relationship. There's no power struggle because the power is shared evenly. This is how relationships actually last. Not through unconditional, one-sided giving, but through mutual choosing. Not through accepting whatever scraps of attention come your way, but through commanding the respect and priority you actually deserve. The right man won't just tolerate this boundary. He'll respect you more for having it. He'll genuinely appreciate being with someone who knows her own worth, because it makes him feel special to be chosen by someone who doesn't choose just anyone. Here are some signs this boundary is actually working, since the shifts can be subtle at first and worth watching for. The first sign is consistency. Once a man realizes you won't just be sitting around whenever he decides he wants attention, he becomes more intentional about when he actually reaches out. Instead of random late-night texts because he's bored, you start getting thoughtful messages at reasonable hours. Instead of last-minute invitations, he starts planning ahead because he knows you have a life and schedule of your own to consider. Another sign is increased effort. He puts more thought into your conversations. The dates become more creative. He starts remembering small details about your life because he realizes he actually has to pay attention to keep your interest. This isn't manipulation on your end. It's him naturally stepping up because he values what actually takes effort to hold on to. You'll also notice increased respect. He starts asking about your plans instead of assuming you're free. He considers your feelings before making decisions that affect you. He starts treating your time as valuable because you've shown him that it is. And that respect tends to extend beyond just how he treats you, into how he talks about you to others. The most telling sign of all, though, is pursuit. Once you stop chasing, once you stop being the one initiating every bit of contact and doing all the effort, the right man will start pursuing you instead. He'll be the one texting first. He'll start making the plans. He'll start putting in real emotional effort because he understands that if he doesn't, he risks losing you altogether. One last thing worth remembering. You are not too much. You are not asking for too much. You deserve someone who genuinely sees your worth and chooses to honor it every single day. This boundary was never about changing who you are. It's about refusing to shrink yourself for someone who doesn't fully appreciate your value. There is a quiet turning point in every emotional life that rarely announces itself with drama. It does not arrive like a thunderclap or a sudden revelation. It comes more like a shift in posture, subtle at first, almost invisible, where the direction of your energy begins to change. And then comes the moment that feels like nothing on the surface, but changes everything underneath. It is not a breakup, not a confrontation, not a dramatic ending. It is simply the beginning of awareness that the same intensity you have been offering outward has never once been fully redirected inward. You begin to notice how easily you have prioritized other people's comfort over your own clarity, how quickly you have adjusted yourself to keep someone else close. How often you have called it understanding when it was actually self-abandonment in slow motion. This is where the story begins to shift. Choosing yourself is not an act of rejection toward others. It is not withdrawal from love. It is the restoration of balance that was never fully present. It is the decision to become a participant in your own emotional life instead of a background supporter in someone else's. And it begins with something deceptively simple: the refusal to disappear inside the needs of another person. At first, this choice can feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable, not because it is wrong, but because it disrupts an old internal pattern. When you have been trained, consciously or unconsciously, to equate love with self-sacrifice, then self-prioritization can feel like selfishness until your nervous system learns a new language. But over time, something shifts. The constant internal negotiation begins to quiet. The urge to over-explain softens. The need to earn basic emotional consistency starts to dissolve. What emerges in its place is not hardness but clarity. You begin to see that real connection does not require you to shrink. It does not require you to guess your worth. It does not require you to constantly prove your emotional value through endurance. The right connection, the one that is aligned rather than imbalanced, does not thrive on depletion. It thrives on mutual presence, mutual effort, mutual recognition. And something else begins to change as well. The energy you once used to manage uncertainty in others starts returning to you. You start noticing your own preferences more clearly. Your own boundaries feel less like obstacles and more like structure. Your own time begins to feel valuable in a way that does not require external validation to justify it. This is the quiet beginning of self-prioritization. It does not mean that love disappears. It means that love is no longer confused with loss of self. It means you are no longer willing to audition for emotional availability. It means you no longer interpret inconsistency as something you must decode endlessly in order to earn stability. Instead, you begin to recognize that stability is not something you negotiate into existence. It is something you either encounter or you do not. And as this internal shift deepens, something almost paradoxical happens externally. You stop chasing dynamics that require you to overextend yourself, and in doing so, you become more emotionally grounded. You become less reactive, more present, less entangled in ambiguity. And this kind of presence is not invisible. It changes the way you are perceived, not because you are trying to be seen differently, but because you are no longer abandoning yourself in the process of seeing others. There is a steadiness that develops when your emotional center is no longer outsourced, and that steadiness carries a kind of quiet gravity. It does not demand attention, but it no longer disappears to avoid it either. In this space, the idea of the right person also transforms. It is no longer someone you have to convince or decode or emotionally carry. It becomes someone who meets you where you are already standing. Someone who does not require your absence in order to feel your presence. Someone who does not interpret your boundaries as distance, but recognizes them as clarity. And yes, in that kind of alignment, effort does exist, but it is different. It is not one-sided pursuit. It is mutual movement, mutual recognition, a willingness to meet rather than a demand to chase. But the most important shift is internal. It is the realization that your life was never waiting to begin at the arrival of someone else's consistency. It begins when you stop treating your own emotional needs as secondary, when you stop negotiating your worth through someone else's behavior, when you stop waiting for external permission to take up emotional space in your own life. From that point forward, relationships stop being places where you lose yourself and start becoming places where you extend yourself without disappearing. And that changes everything, because when you choose yourself with the same intensity you once reserved for choosing others, you do not close the door on love. You open the first real possibility of receiving it without distortion.